Question number 100. What is Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot is a framework built on top of the Spring framework. It simplifies the development process by providing pre-configured setups and defaults to quickly build standalone, production-ready applications. It eliminates the need for extensive XML configurations and focuses on convention over configuration. Question number 99. What are the main features of Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Key features include auto-configuration, starter dependencies, Spring Boot CLI, embedded servers, like Tomcat or Jetty, actuator for monitoring, and production-ready setups. Question number 98. How does Spring Boot differ from the Spring framework?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring framework provides flexibility and modularity but requires significant configuration. Spring Boot simplifies the setup process by introducing auto-configuration, starters, and embedded servers, allowing developers to focus on application logic instead of infrastructure. Question number 97. What are Spring Boot starters?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot starters are predefined dependency descriptors provided by Spring Boot to simplify adding required dependencies for an application. For example, Spring Boot Starter Web includes dependencies for building web applications using Spring MVC. Question number 96. What is the use of the Spring Boot actuator?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot actuator provides production-ready features such as monitoring, metrics, and application health insights. It includes built-in endpoints like actuator health and actuator info to manage and monitor applications in production environments. Question number 95. How does auto-configuration work in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot's auto-configuration works by analyzing the class path and defining default configurations based on the dependencies available. It uses enable auto-configuration and conditional annotations like conditional on class to configure beans when certain classes are present. Question number 94. What is the default embedded server in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The default embedded server in Spring Boot is Apache Tomcat. However, you can switch to Jetty or Undertow by including their respective starter dependencies. Question number 93. What is the significance of the application properties file?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The application properties file, or application.yml, is used to define configuration properties for a Spring Boot application. It includes settings such as server port, database connection details, and custom application properties. Question number 92. How do you override default configurations in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Default configurations can be overridden by 1. Defining properties in application, properties or application.yml. 2. Using command line arguments. 3. Setting system properties with system set property. Question number 91. What is the @SpringBoot application annotation?
3, 2, 1, 0.
@SpringBoot application is a convenience annotation that combines three annotations: @configuration, @enable auto configuration, and @component scan. It marks the main class of a SpringBoot application. Question number 90. What is the role of @component scan in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
@component scan tells Spring to scan the specified package and its sub-packages for components, configurations, and services to register as beans. If not specified, Spring scans the package of the class with the @SpringBoot application annotation by default. Question number 89. How do you configure a SpringBoot application to connect to a database?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use application properties or application.yml to define database connection properties such as Spring datasource.url, Spring datasource username, and Spring datasource password. For example, Spring datasource.url equals JDBC MySQL localhost 3306 MYDB. SpringBoot automatically configures the data source based on these properties if the required dependencies are present. Question number 88. What is a SpringBoot starter dependency? A SpringBoot starter dependency is a set of predefined dependencies bundled together for specific functionality. For example, SpringBoot starter data JPA includes dependencies for JPA and Hibernate, making it easier to work with databases. Question number 87. How can you define custom properties in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Custom properties can be defined in the application properties or application.yml file. Like my custom property equals value. These can be accessed in the application using @value $my custom property or through the environment interface. Question number 86. What is the use of profiles in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Profiles are used to create environment-specific configurations. You can define profile-specific properties in files like application dev properties or application prod properties and activate a profile by setting Spring profiles active equals dev. Question number 85. How does SpringBoot support unit testing? SpringBoot provides testing support through libraries like JUnit and TestNG. The @SpringBootist annotation loads the application context, while @mockbean and @mock can be used to mock dependencies for unit testing. Question number 84. What is the difference between @REST controller and @controller? At-rest controller is a combination of at-controller and at-response body, used to create RESTful web services by automatically converting the return value of methods into JSON or XML. At-controller, on the other hand, is used to define traditional web controllers that return views, like JSP. Question number 83. What is SpringBoot DevTools?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot DevTools provides features like automatic restarts, live reload, and property overrides during development. It enhances developer productivity by reducing the need for manual restarts during code changes. Question number 82. How do you enable HTTPS in a SpringBoot application?
3, 2, 1, 0.
To enable HTTPS, configure an SSL certificate and add the necessary properties in application properties, such as server port equals 8443 and server.ssl.keystore equals classpath keystore.jks. You also need to include server.ssl.keystore password and related SSL settings. Question number 81. What is the role of SpringBoot CLI?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The SpringBoot CLI command line interface is a tool for quickly building SpringBoot applications using Groovy scripts. It simplifies development by reducing boilerplate code and is suitable for prototyping. Question number 80. What is the difference between at SpringBoot application and at enable auto configuration?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at SpringBoot application is a composite annotation that includes at enable auto configuration, at component scan, and at configuration. At enable auto configuration specifically triggers SpringBoot's auto configuration feature. Use at enable auto configuration alone when you need only auto configuration without the component scanning and configuration. Question number 79. How do you configure logging in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot uses SLF4J with logback by default. Logging configurations can be customized in application properties or logback spring.xml. For example, logging.level.org. Spring Framework equals debug sets the logging level for the Spring package to debug. Question number 78. How do you handle exceptions in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use at controller advice and at exception handler annotations to handle exceptions globally or locally. For example, at exception handler, exception class allows you to define methods that process specific exceptions and return appropriate responses. Question number 77. What is the purpose of SpringBoot Starter Parent?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot Starter Parent is a parent COM provided by SpringBoot that simplifies dependency management by specifying default versions of commonly used libraries. It also configures default Maven plugins and settings for your project. Question number 76. How do you create a custom starter in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
To create a custom starter, define a new Maven or Gradle module. Package the required dependencies and auto-configuration logic, and include it in your application as a dependency. Implement an at configuration class with at conditional on class or at conditional on property annotations. For conditional loading. Question number 75. How do you secure a Spring Boot application?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use Spring Security by adding Spring Boot Starter Security as a dependency. Configure security rules using Java configuration in a class annotated with it enable web security. For example, override configure HTTP security HTTP to define custom authentication and authorization rules. Question number 74. What is the use of it bean in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The @bean annotation marks a method as a bean producer. When the method is executed, its return value is registered as a Spring-managed bean in the application context. Question number 73. What is Actuator Health Check in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The health check endpoint, Actuator, Health, provided by Spring Boot Actuator shows the application's health status. You can customize it by implementing health indicator or configuring properties like Management, Endpoint, Health, Show Details. Question number 72. What is a command line runner in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Command line runner is a functional interface provided by Spring Boot. Beans implementing this interface are executed after the application context is loaded. It's useful for running code at startup. Question number 71. How do you define custom error pages in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Define an HTML page in src, main, resources, templates, error with a file name matching the HTTP status. Code, e.g. 404. HTML. Alternatively, creator at controller class annotated with at controller advice to handle errors programmatically. Question number 70. How does Spring Boot simplify database initialization?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot initializes a database automatically if SQL scripts, schema.sql or data.sql, are placed in the src, main, resources directory. It also supports initialization using spring.jpa, hibernate.ddl-auto for JPA entities. Question number 69. What is Spring Boot's role in microservices?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot is widely used for microservices development due to features like embedded servers, auto-configuration, simplicity in integrating with Spring Cloud for distributed systems, and Actuator for monitoring and health checks. Question number 68. What is Spring Boot Starter Test?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot starter test is a starter dependency that includes libraries for testing, such as JUnit, Mockito, and AssertJ. It provides everything required for unit integration and end-to-end testing of SpringBoot applications. Question number 67. What is the role of Entity Manager in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Entity Manager is a JPA interface used for interacting with the persistence context. It provides methods for CRUD operations and queries. In SpringBoot, Entity Manager is managed by Spring, and you can inject it using a persistency context. Question number 66. How can you monitor SpringBoot applications?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use SpringBoot actuator endpoints like actuator health, actuator metrics, and actuator env to monitor application health, metrics, and environment properties. Tools like Micrometer and external monitoring systems, Prometheus, Grafana, can also integrate with SpringBoot for advanced monitoring. Question number 65. What is a transactional in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The transactional annotation is used to manage transactions. It ensures that methods annotated with it are executed within a transactional context. If an exception occurs, the transaction is rolled back automatically. Question number 64. What is the default scope of beans in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The default scope of beans in SpringBoot is singleton, meaning a single instance of the bean is created and shared across the application context. Other scopes include prototype, request, session, and application. Question number 63. How do you enable CORS in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Enable CORS, cross-origin resource sharing, in SpringBoot by adding it cross-origin to controller methods or by configuring it globally using a CORS configuration source bean in the application. Question number 62. How do you connect SpringBoot to an external API?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use the REST template or the newer web client from Spring Web Flux to make HTTP requests to external APIs. Add the required dependencies and define beans for these clients if needed. Example: REST template equals new REST template. REST template get for object https api.example.com string class. Question number 61. What is the role of at request param in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at request param annotation is used to bind request parameters to method arguments in controller classes. For example, at request param name string name binds the name parameter from the request URL query string. Question number 60. What is the purpose of at path variable?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at path variable is used to extract values from URI path parameters and bind them to method arguments in a controller. Example: at getMapping user ID, and at path variable ID string user ID. Question number 59. How do you use WebSockets in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Add the SpringBoot starter WebSocket dependency and configure WebSocket endpoints using at enable WebSocket message broker and at message mapping. WebSockets enable real-time communication between the client and server. Question number 58. What is at value used for in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at value annotation is used to inject values into fields or method parameters from the application, properties file or environment variables. For example, at value $server port private int port. Question number 57. How do you handle file uploads in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use at request param or multipart file in controller methods to handle file uploads. Configure file storage properties in application properties, such as upload directories. Example: public response entity upload file, at request param file, multipart file. Question number 56. How can you schedule tasks in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use the at enable scheduling annotation on a configuration class and annotate methods with it scheduled to schedule tasks. Example: at scheduled fixed rate equals 5,000. Runs a task every 5 seconds. Question number 55. What is the environment interface in Spring?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The environment interface in Spring provides access to environment variables and configuration properties. It allows developers to retrieve properties dynamically using environment getProperty key. Question number 54. How do you implement pagination in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use SpringData JPA's pageable interface to implement pagination. For example, the findAll pageable method in a repository returns a page object containing paginated data. You can specify page number and size as parameters in your service or controller. Question number 53. What is the role of at REST controller advice?
3, 2, 1, 0.
At REST controller advice is a specialization of at controller advice for REST APIs. It is used to handle exceptions globally and to customize response bodies for RESTful web services. Methods annotated with at exception handler inside at REST controller advice classes return JSON responses. Question number 52. How do you enable async processing in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Add the at enable async annotation to a configuration class and use the at async annotation on methods to execute them asynchronously. Spring will execute these methods in a separate thread pool. You can configure the pool using a task executor bean. Question number 51. What is SpringBoot's at conditional annotation?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The conditional annotation is used to conditionally enable or disable beans based on custom logic or predefined conditions. It is commonly used for configuring beans based on the presence of specific classes, properties, or other runtime factors. Question number 50. What is the purpose of it primary in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The primary annotation marks a bean as the primary candidate when multiple beans of the same type exist. Spring will inject the primary bean by default unless specified otherwise using a qualifier. Question number 49. How do you use profiles for bean definitions?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Annotate beans with a profile to make them active only for specific profiles. For example, @profile dev ensures the bean is loaded only when the dev profile is active. Activate profiles using the Spring Profiles active property. Question number 48. What is Spring Boot DevTools restart feature?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The restart feature in Spring Boot DevTools automatically reloads the application context when code changes are made. It improves developer productivity by avoiding the need for manual restarts during development. Question number 47. How do you integrate Hibernate with Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Include the Spring Boot Starter Data JPA dependency. Configure database properties in Application Properties, and annotate entity classes with JPA annotations like @entity and @ID. Spring Boot automatically integrates Hibernate as the default JPA provider. Question number 46. How can you use Feign in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Add the Spring Cloud Starter Open Feign dependency. Enable Feign with Enable Feign Clients, and define Feign Clients as interfaces annotated with Feign Client. Use Feign Clients to make declarative HTTP requests to external APIs. Question number 45. How do you handle validation in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use the @valid annotation on request objects and define validation rules using JSR 380 annotations, like @not-null, @size, and @email. Handle validation errors using binding result or @controller advice. Question number 44. What is the purpose of conditional property?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The conditional property is used to conditionally enable a bean based on the presence or value of a specific property in the application's configuration. For example, @conditional on property name equals feature enabled, having value equals true. Question number 43. What is Spring Boot's embedded server?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot includes embedded servers like Tomcat, Jetty, and Undertow by default, which allow applications to run independently without deploying to an external application server. The embedded server can be configured in the application properties file. Question number 42. What is the purpose of Enable Auto Configuration?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Enable Auto Configuration enables SpringBoot to configure beans automatically based on the class path dependencies, annotations, and application context settings. It simplifies setup by providing sensible defaults. Question number 41. How do you configure YAML in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
YAML configuration is supported by SpringBoot in application.yml. It uses a hierarchical structure for defining properties. For example, server, port, 8080. SpringBoot reads this file automatically, and it can be used alongside application properties. Question number 40. How do you implement caching in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use the enable caching annotation to enable caching and apply annotations like @cacheable, @cacheput, and @cacheEvict on methods. Configure a cache manager, e.g., acache, Redis, or in-memory caches, and specify caching properties in application properties. Example, @cacheable, users, public user find user by id, long ID. Question number 39. What is the purpose of the @SpringBootist annotation?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The @SpringBootist annotation is used for integration testing. It starts the complete application context and allows testing of all application layers. Additional attributes like web environment can specify the environment, e.g., web environment, mock. Question number 38. How do you implement a RESTful web service in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use @REST controller and map HTTP endpoints using @GET mapping, @POST mapping, @PUT mapping, and @DELETE mapping. Define your API logic inside these methods. Example, @GET mapping, users, public list less than user greater than get USERs. Question number 37. What is SpringBoot's actuator?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot actuator provides production-ready features for monitoring and managing applications. It exposes endpoints for health checks, metrics, environment properties, and more. Example, actuator, health shows the application's health status. You can enable or disable specific endpoints using configuration properties. Question number 36. What are SpringBoot starters?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Starters are pre-configured dependencies for common functionalities in SpringBoot. For example, SpringBoot Starter Web includes libraries for building web applications. These starters reduce boilerplate setup and configuration. Question number 35. How do you externalize configuration in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot supports external configuration via application properties, application.yml, environment variables, command line arguments, and external files. The configuration properties annotation combined properties to POJOs for easier management. Question number 34. How do you use web client in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Web client is part of Spring Web Flux and is used for non-blocking HTTP requests. Example: web client equals web client. Create client.get.uri https api.example.com. Retrieve body to mono string class block. It is a replacement for REST template in reactive applications. Question number 33. What is the use of Spring.jpa, Hibernate.ddl auto?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The Spring.jpa, Hibernate.ddl auto property controls the database schema generation and update process. For example, update updates the schema, create creates the schema at startup, and validate ensures the schema matches the entity definitions. Question number 32. How do you enable HTTPS in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Configure an SSL certificate and specify the key store details in application properties. For example, server.ssl.keystore, server.ssl.keystore password, and server port equals 8443. Enable HTTPS. Use tools like OpenSSL or Let's Encrypt to generate SSL certificates. Question number 31. How do you handle internationalization, I18N, in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use message source beans and resource bundles, e.g., messages_n. Properties. For internationalization, enable locale resolution by defining a locale resolver bean and specifying the desired locale through URL, session, or headers. Question number 30. What is it configuration properties used for?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The configuration properties annotation binds hierarchical properties from configuration files, e.g., application properties or application.yml, to Java beans. Example: at configuration properties, prefix equals app, maps app.name and app version properties to a bean. Question number 29. What is the purpose of it enable web security?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The enable web security enables Spring Security's web security configuration. It allows you to define custom authentication and authorization rules in a class extending Web Security Configurer Adapter. Example: HTTP authorize requests and matches admin asterisk has role admin. Question number 28. How do you handle exceptions for REST APIs?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use it REST controller advice and define methods annotated with it exception handler to catch and handle exceptions. Return a structured response, e.g., JSON, with error details. Example: At exception handler. Resource not found exception. Class. Question number 27. What is at component scan in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at component scan tells Spring to scan a specified package for components, configurations, and services. By default, SpringBoot scans the package containing the main application class and its sub-packages. You can specify additional packages using the base packages attribute. Question number 26. How do you configure SpringBoot to connect to a database?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Configure database connection properties in application properties or application.yml. Example: Spring datasource.url equals jdbc mysql localhost 3306 mydb Spring datasource username equals root and Spring datasource password equals root. Include the relevant JDBC driver dependency in your project. Question number 25. What is the difference between at REST controller and at controller?
3, 2, 1, 0.
At controller is used for traditional MVC applications and typically returns view names, while at REST controller is a combination of at controller and at response body. Designed for RESTful APIs, it returns JSON or XML directly as the response body. Question number 24. What is SpringBoot's SpringBoot DevTools?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot DevTools is a development time tool that enables features like automatic application restarts, live reloads, and property overrides to improve developer productivity. It is not included in production builds. Question number 23. How do you secure a REST API in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use Spring Security to secure REST APIs. Configure authentication and authorization rules in a Web Security Configurer adapter class. Implement JWT JSON Web Token for token-based authentication or use OAuth 2 for more advanced security requirements. Question number 22. How does SpringBoot support testing?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot provides testing support via annotations like at SpringBoot Test, at mockbean, at Web MVC Test, and at Data JPA Test. It also integrates with JUnit and Mockito for unit and integration testing. Question number 21. What is at path variable used for in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at path variable binds values from the URI path to method parameters in controller methods. For example, in a URL like user ID, the ID value can be accessed with at path variable ID long user ID. Question number 20. How do you configure logging in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot uses SLF4J with Logback as the default logging framework. Configure logging levels and patterns in application properties using properties like logging, level, root equals info or logging.file.name equals app.log. For custom configurations, use a logback spring.xml file. Question number 19. What is it scheduled in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The @scheduled annotation is used to schedule tasks to run at fixed intervals or cron expressions. It requires enable scheduling to be added in a configuration class. Example: @scheduled, fixed rate equals 5,000. Executes the annotated method every 5 seconds. Question number 18. What is the purpose of @lazy in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The @lazy annotation is used to delay the initialization of a bean until it is first requested. It improves startup performance by avoiding the creation of unused beans during application. Initialization. Example: @lazy @component public class myBean. Question number 17. How does SpringBoot handle exceptions globally?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use controller advice or REST controller advice to define global exception handlers. Methods annotated with exception handler process specific exceptions and provide custom responses. For REST APIs, responses are typically JSON objects with error details. Question number 16. What is the purpose of the Spring main banner mode property?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The Spring main banner mode property controls the display of the SpringBoot banner during startup. Set it to off to disable the banner, console for display in the console, or log for display in the log file. Example: Spring main banner mode equals off. Question number 15. How do you implement dependency injection in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot implements dependency injection using annotations like @autowired, @component, @service, and @repository. Beans are automatically wired into dependent components by Spring's IOC container. Constructor-based injection is preferred for better testability. Question number 14. How do you configure multipart file uploads in SpringBoot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Enable multipart support by adding Spring Servlet multipart. Enable equals true and configure properties like Spring Servlet multipart.max file size. Use multipart file in your controller to handle file uploads. Example: public response entity upload file, @request param file, multipart file. Question number 13. What is the purpose of request mapping?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The request mapping is used to map HTTP requests to controller methods. It supports mapping requests to specific paths and HTTP methods. Example: @request mapping, value equals API, method equals request method, get maps get requests to the API endpoint. Question number 12. What is the purpose of at component, at service, and at repository in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
These annotations are used to define beans in Spring's IOC container. At component is a generic annotation for any Spring-managed bean. At service is typically used for service layer beans. And at repository is used for DAO, data access object, layer beans. They all have the same underlying functionality but provide semantic meaning for different layers. Question number 11. How do you enable Spring security in a Spring Boot application?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Add the Spring Boot Starter security dependency to your project. You can then configure authentication and authorization in a configuration class by extending Web Security Configurer adapter and overriding the configure HTTP security HTTP method to specify security rules. Question number 10. What is the purpose of @value annotation in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The @value annotation is used to inject values from properties files or environment variables into Spring Beans. Example: @value $app.name. Private string app_name will inject the value of app.name from application properties. Question number 9. What is @autowired and how does it work in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
@autowired is used to inject dependencies into Spring Beans automatically. It can be applied to constructors, fields, or setter methods. Spring will resolve and inject the appropriate bean at runtime based on the type or name of the bean. Question number 8. What is Spring Boot's application properties file used for?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The application properties file is used to configure various application settings such as database connections, logging levels, server configurations, etc. It allows you to externalize configuration and keep environment-specific settings outside the code base. Question number 7. How do you define a Spring Boot bean?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Use the @bean annotation inside a configuration class to define a Spring Bean manually. Example: @bean public my bean, return new my bean, closing curly bracket. Spring will manage the life cycle of the bean. Question number 6. What is the use of enable auto configuration?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Enable auto configuration enables Spring Boot's auto configuration mechanism, which automatically configures the application based on the dependencies in the class path. It reduces the need for manual configuration and helps Spring Boot figure out what beans to create based on the application's environment and requirements. Question number 5. What is Spring Boot's SpringBoot application annotation?
3, 2, 1, 0.
SpringBoot application is a convenience annotation that combines configuration, enable auto configuration, and component scan with their default attributes. It's the main entry point for Spring Boot applications and typically placed on the main class that starts the application. Question number 4. How do you create a custom Spring Boot starter?
3, 2, 1, 0.
To create a custom Spring Boot starter, you package dependencies and auto-configuration classes into a separate module. The starter module should have a Spring Factories file to register the auto-configuration classes. And consumers can include the starter module as a dependency in their projects. Question number 3. What is Spring Boot's at enable auto-configuration?
3, 2, 1, 0.
The at enable auto-configuration annotation in Spring Boot enables automatic configuration of beans based on the project's class path. It automatically configures Spring Beans and other features, such as the data source, based on the dependencies available in the application. Question number 2. How do you configure custom beans in Spring Boot?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Custom beans can be configured using the @bean annotation inside or @configuration class. Beans can be created manually and customized with constructor arguments or setters. Additionally, beans can be injected into other beans using the @auto-wired annotation. Question number 1. How does Spring Boot simplify Java development?
3, 2, 1, 0.
Spring Boot simplifies Java development by offering auto-configuration, built-in dependencies, and embedded web servers, allowing developers to create standalone applications with minimal setup. It reduces boilerplate code by automatically configuring components based on the class path and application properties.